W.Ashe, you've just taken the position of the 68th President of the General Assembly.
68th.
Yeah. Um, you have spoken extensively about your priorities and your aspirations for this session between the time that you got elected and the time that you have actually opened the session. Now that you have the gavel and you're about to host 193 member states, including some 90 heads of state and government, how has your perspective changed?
Well, it hasn't. If it has changed, it has been brought more sharply into focus now that the day is actually here, has come and gone. We do hope that when the heads of state and government are here, that they will indeed address the theme that I have identified.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see your role in? You have worked a lot on trying to create a focus for this session, setting the stage. How do you see your role as keeping that focus? Are you going to be a inspirational leader? Are you going to be try to make consensus out of what is bubbling up from below? Or are you going to keep reminding people what the actual focus is? Because it can wander.
As well as it ought to,
yeah.
Given that we have the present concerns. But the short answer to that is that one has to be a mixture of all three. You have to inspire, you have to seek consensus, and then of course you have to make accommodations for the vagaries of the position.
Mm-hmm. Is there any, now that you're actually in the position, is there a role in the general debate that's starting, that we're now on the verge of? Is there a role in the president's office of trying to shape the leaders, the world leaders who are going to come here? Have you communicated has your office communicated with them to try to keep the focus on the setting the stage on the agenda for the post-2015 period?
Well, at the end of the day, you're dealing with sovereign countries and their respective heads of state and government. So it's impossible to dictate to them what they should. The usual way of communicating is through their representatives here in New York. And the short answer to that is yes, I have done so, to remind them of what the theme is. But ultimately, a head of state and government has 15 minutes, perhaps 15 minutes of fame, and I'm sure they will intend to utilize fully that 15 minutes to speak on virtually anything they so choose.
Have you gotten feedback on if they're agreeing with these priorities?
Well, as I said, you're dealing with several countries, so they don't. It's not a sort of give and take. But let's just say from the representative level here in New York, the response has been positive.
Oh, that's good. Do you see this this first the general debate period, where there's a lot of focus, as everybody is here? How would you describe what you want to? How would you differentiate what you want to achieve during this period, as opposed to the session in general?
Well, this is an opportunity to hear from the highest levels of government on how they see the post-2015 development agenda emerging, and so it's an important time frame for us to get, as we would say in my day as a permanent representative, guidance from our heads. So that's why it becomes important, and one cannot overemphasize that particular importance and the need to hear from the heads themselves how they see the post-2015 development agenda emerging.
And there's been a lot of, since, well, at least and before Rio Plus 20, there's been a lot of input. We've had consultations, a Million Voices report has been put out about global consultations about what the priorities should be for the post-2015 development agenda. How do you see any sort of consensus building at this point? How do you see the new agenda shaping up? Do you see any priorities that seem to be, that there's no questions that they'll be part of it? Do you see the overall sustainability part of it included?
Well, I don't think the intent is to arrive at consensus at the outset. The intent, I hope, is to identify a common set of parameters on which everyone can agree ought to be included in any agenda, and then working to shape them in a way that people can ultimately find consensus.
But do you see any elements at all that seem to be common to all this input that we've had so far from these consultations and Rio Plus 20 and do you see any points of consensus that are emerging?
Well, there are different strands of work that are currently ongoing, two of which I'm sure you're familiar with, have to do with the Sustainable Development Goals. That would be a very important exercise. And currently, we just started discussions at the intergovernmental level on financing, which you know, or what is generally known as the means of implementation, which is also an important plank going forward. The outputs of these exercises will come to General Assembly at the start of the 69th session, and that would be an important time period, I think, to start pulling everything together.
Do you see general agreement on, as opposed to the Millennium Development Goals, of putting more of a comprehensive approach together where there's been a number of UN officials who've complained that one problem with the achievement of the Millennium Development Goals, people saw them as separate, and that under the sustainability targets that they would be better integrated. Do you see progress towards that?
Well, I must admit I hadn't heard that. I've heard other complaints, but not that specific one. But more importantly, I think what we have now put in place is substantially different from what was put in place for the Millennium Development Goals. There, the approach was more top-down. Here, they're trying to have a more bottom-up approach. So you have many voices, some, of course, not in agreement. But what one hopes is that there'd be a core set of goals identified at the end of the period that we can all agree on. And it would make up for the perceived shortcomings of the Millennium Development Goals.
Okay, well, they're asking us to hurry up. So I just want to get to, how do you see the relationship between the General Assembly and the Security Council? How do you see it developing under your session?
Well, I hope it will be a cordial and collegiate one. Of course, there are differences between the two bodies. One has a certain cachet, so to speak, and the other is a more deliberative type of body. At the end of the day, they have their separate responsibilities and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future.
And on Syria, has anything between you're taking the gavel, and has any consensus developed on action in the General Assembly on Syria?
Well, as you know, the matter of Syria, at least currently, is being dealt with by the Security Council, which where rightfully it does belong, because you're talking about ultimately action under what is called Chapter 7 of the Charter of the United Nations, and that's solely within the purview of the Security Council. If and when the matter comes before the General Assembly, then I'm sure we will deal with it accordingly.
Oh, thank you. And our when in terms of Security Council reform, do you see any particular reforms that could make the relationship more effective between the two bodies?
Well, on the overall question of Security Council reform, there are no shortage of ideas. There are quite a few. Where the difficulty lies is getting member states to agree on a core set of reform ideas, and that's what I'm hoping to turn my attention to at this session. Okay,
and this is the last question.
Really?
Well, they just. All right. You've spoken before about the choice that you made, that you had thought you were going into medicine, and that you could also, through diplomacy, help many people with survival and with well-being. Do you think that your part of the focus in your 60th session will be on individual well-being? Will it shift towards individual and society and community well-being?
Well, that has always been a goal of mine, and perhaps that's why I sort of drifted into sustainable development as a core area, given the potential to do something that would benefit future generations. I don't think that will change during my tenure as President of the General Assembly.
Well, thank you very much, President.
You're welcome.
Thanks.